Hi, everybody, and welcome to our first webcast of 2024. My name is Tim Culverhouse, and I'm the editorial director of Robotics 24/7, and I'll serve as today's mediator of our discussion called Robots and AI Open New Applications. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for today's webcast, Korber Supply Chain Software and Hy-Tek Intralogistics. Industrial robots and cobots are utilizing advanced AI technologies more frequently than ever, as organizations enable these tools with enhanced options such as computer vision, object detection, pathfinding, and more. How are organizations utilizing this high-powered technology to augment their work with robots to optimize their processes? Now I'd like to answer these questions and more by introducing our speakers for today's roundtable. First, we have John Santagate, Vice President of Robotics at Korber Supply Chain Software. And we have Joe McGrath, the Solutions Design Lead at Hy-Tek Intralogistics. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me and discussing these important topics in the robotics industry, and welcome.
Hey, Tim, thanks for having us.
Yep, glad to be here.
Now, before we start today's presentation and discussion, let's go over some housekeeping. If there are any audience questions you'd like to submit to our panelists, please submit them via the red question box at the bottom of your window at any time. Any questions that aren't addressed in today's discussion will be answered following today's program. If the slides accompanying today's discussion aren't advancing in your window, please hit the F5 key on your keyboard to refresh your browser window. Viewers, if you'd like to download a PDF of today's slides and other supporting documents, you can do so by clicking on the blue paperclip of the Resources box located at the bottom of your browser. And if you're still experiencing other technical difficulties with today's webcast, please click the orange question mark box at the bottom of your browser window for further help and instructions. Thank you so much. Now, at this point, let's do some brief introductions. John, why don't you kick us off?
Sure thing. Thank you, Tim. Thank you for having me be a part of this session. And I didn't actually realize this was the first Robotics 24/7 webinar of the year. So I got to say how excited I am to be a part of kicking off this session and in what's sure to be a very exciting year and a great session of or series, I should say, of informational topics that I know the organization has planned. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. Yeah, as Tim mentioned, my name's John Santagate. I am the Vice President of Robotics at Kerber Supply Chain. So I thought I'd kick things off by telling you a little bit about Kerber Supply Chain, who we are and what we do in this space, and segue that into how artificial intelligence is playing a role in the evolution and development of our solution portfolio. But as we think about that, the first question to ask ourselves is why? Why are we participating as an organization in the supply chain space, and why do we believe it is such an important industry to be a part of today? And when I say industry, I mean the process of supply chain and logistics. And as we all know, that transcends any particular industry or vertical market and covers all things from manufacturing industries, high tech, soft goods, hard goods, etc. And what we're seeing, over the last several years is this drastic evolution in terms of the way in which buyers are buying, suppliers are supplying, and the way in which we're moving products and goods throughout the global ecosystem. And, all of these changes in evolution, we're seeing injecting a tremendous amount of complexity into supply chain operations. So, our mantra at Kerber Supply Chain is conquering supply chain complexity. And how we do that is, we take a end-to-end look at supply chain execution technologies. The solutions that we focus on are designed to improve the operations to improve warehousing operations, all things within the four walls, but also looking beyond the four walls to the network execution layer. So Kerber Supply Chain is an organization that provides software technologies such as warehouse management, warehouse control, labor management, transportation management. I'd venture to say if it has to do with warehouse execution and ends with management system, we've got a role to play in that space. But in addition to our role in the execution software technology stack, we're also the largest global supplier of voice technologies in the world, and we are a supplier of autonomous mobile robotics technologies, recognized as one of the largest in the world in that arena as well. Where a lot of our technologies, when you think about the software side of our business, are IP related, where we are developing the technology and taking that to market. Our robotics practice is slightly different in that we leverage a robust portfolio of partnerships that we go to market around. And the way we do that is by helping our customers, identify the best fit solution for their operation. Then we go through the design process and design warehouse automation solutions for our customers that we then provide and sell to the customers, lead the implementation integration, and essentially vertically integrate what we view as a channel approach to providing mobile robotics to the market. The key value in that approach here is that we're not married to any one particular solution. What we do is we look to understand the customer's objectives, constraints, and so forth, so that we're finding a best fit solution, not any fit solution. And I want to backtrack there a minute and think about the portfolio that we provide from a software solution stack and the role in which artificial intelligence is playing in the market today. It's been a hot topic for years now. We're seeing the continued maturity, although it is still a very nascent industry overall, of artificial intelligence. And as a business, we're looking at all of the ways in which this technology can apply to benefit our customers, both within the existing set of solutions that we provide and the broader market. How do we partner or acquire solutions that help us better supply problem-solving techniques for our customers? And so, we do look at things such as intelligent slotting, intelligent transportation solutions. How do we apply more robust tracking and delivery solutions within the warehouse and throughout the network? And how do we apply artificial intelligence into the way in which we're doing it today? And perhaps how do we redesign for the platform of the future to better utilize those more modern technologies? But that said, why don't we I'd like to share a quick look at, when we talk about the robotics side of things, of a recent customer that we had delivered recently in the fashion and apparel industry with the mobile robotics. And then I'll talk briefly about how artificial intelligence played a role there as well. So Ariat is a customer of ours that is leveraging multiple products within our solution portfolio, including our warehouse management system, as well as a Geek Plus robotics fulfillment solution that was designed, deployed, and integrated by the Kerber supply chain team. Those technologies, again, as we continue to evolve our business, we work with customers like Ariat to identify how do we improve upon the solutions that have already been deployed, as well as how do we look at what's coming down the road and what's next. A very key and interesting thing that we'll talk about throughout the course of the next 45 minutes or so is the application of artificial intelligence type solutions and the impact on robotics. And one thing of note here when we think about mobile robotics is this industry has evolved as a function of the evolution of artificial intelligence, right? These robots, they execute in real time. They're moving around in oftentimes environments where there's other material that's moving around. And when you think about the way they operate, they identify where they are, leverage vision systems to look at, where they are operationally, and make decisions about their movement based on the real-time environment in which they are operating specifically. So, that's one way in which artificial intelligence is driving the role of mobile robotics specifically. Although there is quite a few other scenarios that we'll talk about as we sort of peel back the onion here in the course of the discussion here today. So with that said, I do want to pass the baton over to Joe McGrath over at HighTech Solutions to talk a little bit about himself and his organization.
Thanks, John. Hey, I'm Joe McGrath. I'm a solutions design lead for Hy-Tek Intralogistics. Hy-Tek's been around in various forms since 1963, and we've kind of gone end to end technology-wise. So we touch a lot of conventional stuff, and we touch a lot of cutting-edge stuff. We even bring some new technologies to market, and we do a ton of research on that. So in this little kind of short topic I want to talk about, I took a bit of a different stab than John did, and if you think about our industry, we have a whole bunch of like use cases for AI, and they fall in kind of broadly two categories. One is, can I apply that AI to the technology? And I think there's an unbelievable number of applications where we see that today, machine vision and all kinds of stuff. And then there's the design side. So, as a solution design lead, I'm thinking, well, how do I apply AI to my job, engineering teams, data analysis, and so forth, so we can create better systems, right? So yeah, let's take a second to talk about that. Using AI, like a generative AI, or large language models, in typical engineering practices has been something that's been super high profile in the past. You'll notice like more and more applications where this is being added in. So Autodesk AI is creeping into a bunch of applications and allows an engineer to do a whole bunch more with a whole bunch less. Microsoft Copilot can be bolted on directly to Microsoft Office. So if you're working on a huge data set and you're trying to understand what exactly the right design requirements that I need to pass along to my team, you could have a detailed conversation with an AI about a specific context, right? And understand insights that you may have missed, as a professional. And then even something as simple as like using the diffusion AI in SketchUp to create a more meaningful and impactful communication of like what this system should look and feel like to the end users. Just these like pretty common and like available tools can reduce the project lifecycle for a design engineer. They can increase the accuracy of the solution, so we can make a better, like more optimized concept for a customer. And it allows engineers to be even more creative than they otherwise would be. Kind of as a look, like we can reimagine whole rooms. Now this is a living room. We don't really specialize in living room design, but apply this to a distribution center or a workstation where operators are trying to give feedback, and we want to adjust things in real time and do lots and lots of iterations. But typically, that type of work is very engineering intensive, and you can spend, I don't know if anybody's ever done it, hundreds and hundreds of hours on workstation design for pretty small tweaks. In this case, you can say, hey, this is my current operation. Like AI, help me reimagine this with these inputs. So again, it's a pretty simple thing, but from an engineering perspective, from a design perspective, it's very powerful tools. And another note, I think for AI use case for the design side of the house is research, right? So a lot of times, if you're an engineer or if you're a solutions design lead, or maybe you're in sales and you're trying to put the solution together and work through some data, you don't necessarily have tons and tons of time to go and understand all of the complex context of the project, right? And your designs will suffer because of that. And a lot of times it has to do with you have deadlines, right? But you can actually use AI, and I think a lot of people have already dabbled in this already, but do research on an industry or on a company or like on a context to help you get there faster. And that kind of leads in to the ability to leverage AI for professionals to continue research and learning, right? So there's a lot of new technology, and even in John's presentation, he rattled off quite a number of technologies that are new to the market, emerging and changing constantly. And we deal with this all the time as well. How do you keep up with all that? Right? You're an engineer, you've gone to school for a long time, but now you have tons and tons of deadlines you have to hit. Like, how do you keep up with all that changing industry? So one of the ways is allow AI to assist you in doing all that research. How to create training plans for yourself, for your team, try to find the relevant and critical like learning paths, and then focus on those things. So you really can increase the efficiency of learning for an organization or for an individual, and improve the outcomes of those folks pretty dramatically. And then this one is pretty near and dear to me because I may or may not have a lot of problems with tone in my communications. I've been working on it for years and years and years. But yeah, AI can be used to improve communications and some of the administrative work for engineering professions. So think about you writing an email, you're a little hot, but have Grammarly help you out, like work through some AI prompts and get the tone corrected or get the communication to be very, very concise and right to the point, right? Have Canva help you put together PowerPoint presentations so you're not spending tons of time aligning things and trying to make it look just right. So your communication, the thing that you created, like comes through in the communication documents. And then sometimes, from an administrative perspective, you have some very long email threads that you've got to work through, and you don't want to miss a whole bunch of details in there. Have OpenAI help you summarize super long email threads and figure out exactly what the status of the item is and where you need to get in and help out. Those are kind of the high level ones I wanted to hit there, but yeah.
Awesome, Joe and John. Yeah, no, thank you guys so much for walking through some of the things that Kerber and Hy-Tek are doing with the AI side of things. And now we can move into our panel discussion. And then just a reminder again for our audience, if you'd like to submit any questions for our Q&A segment that will end today's discussion, please do so at the bottom of your browser. But at this point, and Joe, I'll toss this first question to you. AI continues to offer more capabilities and features for industrial robots and cobots. And what are you guys seeing at Hy-Tek and then across the industry as a whole as some of the barriers to entry for AI? Or, in 2024, at this point, are those barriers to entry kind of a thing of the past just because of various market trends and how organizations have dealt with AI and robotics these past handful of years?
I think some of the traditional barriers to entry are going to be cost, right? That's a barrier for a lot of reasons and for a lot of folks. So I think that the costs of like AI-enabled technologies are coming down, and AI is largely to be thanked for that, right? And then I think the second big roadblock for these technologies that are AI-enabled is like understanding like how to use the thing, right? So there are an increasing number of resources, experts in the field that apply this all the time. And so that increased availability and that reduced costs are pushing that barrier of entry away. And I think because that barrier of entry is shrinking so quickly, it's not too expensive to use it, and there's plenty of people that know how to do it. We're going to start seeing a pretty quick proliferation of these type of technologies. And there's some that are out there today, a lot of work in vision already. I think we're just to see more and more and more of that like pop up. But yeah, I think it's largely going to be a thing of the past in 24, 25. It may not even be a conversation.
Yeah, Tim, if I may, thinking about barriers to entry, I think, I think Joe hit some really key points. Obviously, budget's always a big one, especially with nascent technology or emerging technology, and trying to actually capture an ROI on an investment. What does that look like? But I think a little bit differently, right? In looking about the growth and adoption of the technology, to me, two things really stand out. From a barrier or a growth and adoption perspective is the idea of broad applicability, right? Or at least finding the right fit for this technology. Today, artificial intelligence is really still very narrow in scope, right? A solution is built to perform automate decision-making within a set of parameters, if you will, right? And if you put that decision-making engine outside of the parameters with which it's designed for, you're not going to get a very useful outcome, right? And what does that mean? It means, as businesses, from a barrier to entry perspective, having at least direction in where you're looking for the application of the technology and finding those tools and solution sets that exist that address, the specification of what you're trying to solve for. And the other piece, I think, is probably more of I guess maybe not necessarily a dark horse, but we need to think about public sentiment, right? And think about the growth and proliferation of artificial intelligence and the way in which it's projected in the media, projected in the news, and the degree of understanding of what the technology really is, right? If you think back, I don't know, was it 2 or 3 years ago, maybe not even that far, there were those chatbots that Facebook created that started creating their own language and having conversations back and forth that were gibberish to anybody but those 2 particular chatbots, as an example. That's somewhat frightening, right? Technology that can not just perform within constraints, but broadly make decisions on its own. And so beyond cost, I think the big concerns from my perspective are, where do you find the fit, but also, how do you align the fitness into a way that's, shown in a positive light, showing benefit and reducing the perceived risk of the solutions.
And as a follow-up to that, John, you mentioned some of these risks and then the human nature of the interaction with robots and AI, and especially as these large language models, these natural language models continue to grow and expand. What are you seeing either from the Kerber specific example or even just the industry as a whole of ways that organizations are working with their staff to work with these robots and develop sort of best practices in terms of how somebody can interact with a robot for all intents and purposes?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tim, and it's one that's certainly timely, right? If we look back over the last, we'll call it 5 years, right? The growth of robotics in the workplace has just become astronomical, and it's not just being applied. I participate in the warehouse where we're using robots to take on what are very mundane and tedious tasks that the labor pool isn't necessarily there for. But if you look at the news, and recently, I want to say it was local to my area, there was a notification of a wage increase at a particular fast food chain, followed up by, and now they're automating that task with intelligent devices, right? And so we are seeing the application of these technologies into different areas. And so that growth is going to create the need for organizations to, create plans around change management. Change management becomes very, very important as you deploy these technologies. One way we've seen success as we deployed autonomous mobile robots into these environments is engaging the workforce early on in the process so that, they take a sense of ownership into the outcome. It's not just simply deploying some new scary tool that's there to absorb, job opportunities, and really educate the folks to have the real understanding that these tools are here to make your job, your day-to-day job, a little bit easier and allow you to level up, do something different, extend your skill set into other areas, because you don't have to focus on specific to mobile robots in the warehouse, walking 8, 9, 10 miles a day within the construct of your day. And really interestingly, just a little tidbit, and I know this is somewhat off of AI, but because AI plays such a critical role in the growth and development of robotics, it's important to talk about. But a very, just a tidbit, we had a customer that held a competition within their labor force and allowed the winners of these competitions to name the robots. So the robots that are running around this warehouse now are personalized and are really viewed more as a member of the team. So, I do believe, especially when you're talking physical technology in the workplace, that really having a robust change management policy in place and really educating the team on the role, the very specific role of that tool, and project them as tools that are designed to help folks, goes a long way in adoption and success in these sorts of deployments.
Joe, anything you'd like to add in terms of that? And a follow-up that I would like to address in this portion of our conversation is these best practices that we talk about with interacting humans and robots. And if you can think back maybe 2 years ago, 5 years ago even, when we started seeing the rollout of these interactive capabilities between humans and robots, how has this changed so much? And are we at a point now where organizations and their employees are able to kind of pick this up pretty quickly, or are there still elements of challenges where they face and there isn't that ideal best practice between here is how person A at company B can interact with this robot to help optimize performances as compared to hold them back?
I think, yeah, so I want to pick on one thing you said there. So there is a bit of a difference between interacting with the robots, and we have seen a pretty dramatic shift in how robots are interacted with, right? So there's kind of fixed capital, big Fanic bot, you cage it up because it's dangerous and it's extremely productive and kind of is what it is. And then we have these cobots, right? Those are getting into the market more and more and more. And so the human and machine interaction is a lot different. Now, there's another kind of human-machine interaction that is happening, and I think it's happening much more quickly and a little bit more subtly, and that is with like the intelligence behind it. So how are operators, engineers, and designers interacting with the actual AI, right? The bot is one thing, the AI is going to be the brain. So how are we communicating with this machine, right? And what are kind of some of the big, giant lessons there? And I think one thing, and we talked about this a little offline, but can you build, are you able to build a narrative and a context and effectively communicate with that machine? Now, it's going to become easier and easier as these models grow. So you get, the difference between 3.5 and 4, right? Like how well is it going to respond to, you just asking it questions or giving it direction. But your ability to like communicate and direct like that AI is going to like have a huge impact on how well you're going to get an outcome you want from that robot or that system or whatever that AI happens to be directed, right? So I think some of the bigger change pieces might be, getting folks comfortable with communicating with not a human or communicating with not just ladder logic and or just an algorithm that does exactly what you've like input, and instead interacting with something that's going to like have a very complex reaction to what you say to it. We can tell the robot what to do. It's pretty easy, but the AI, you almost have a discussion with it, right? Don't want to anthropomorphize too much, get in trouble. But yeah.
Joe, I think that's an interesting point you bring up, right? You mentioned something I thought was very thought-provoking there is how do you get acceptance and comfort with communicating with these technologies, right? And the really cool thing is if we look back into our personal lives, right? Take the workplace out of it entirely, right? My kids are communicating with Alexa on a daily basis that's connected to their light to tell their light to turn off at the end of the night, right? That's conversational AI, right? We're seeing chatbots when you log in to talk to your bank and you need to find some deposit slip and you're communicating via chatbot. That's conversational AI. So it's interesting to think that sort of the comfort level and the interaction with this technology is sort of being slipped into our daily lives, which, I presume will likely translate into easier adoption in the workplace as it becomes more, more dispersed in the workplace because of our comfort level in our home life with this technology. I mean, even when you're doing talk to text or texting or typing and you see that the predictive script come out, right? That's fenced in AI that's making an assumption based on the tone and structure of your sentence, what logically will come next. And if you think back to when that's happened to you, if you look farther up in your conversation thread or your email, you'll notice that the predictions tie back to the things that you were saying earlier in the conversation. So it's just really fascinating to me to see how real this technology is in the way in which our personal interactions are likely shaping our professional interactions.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we've talked about how AI can be such a broad topic, and we've focused a lot of GPTs of the world, but I'm curious, and I'll open this to either of you, Joe or John, in terms of the other elements that we want to highlight in today's discussion: computer vision, object detection, pathfinding. I mean, we're seeing things from our vantage point here with organizations deploying tools, and we're seeing these expanded capabilities with vision detection and high definition cameras and stuff of that nature. So we'd love to hear either of you guys expand on these topics and how we've seen such a jump with AI outside of the language portion of the artificial intelligence realm.
Yeah,
Joe, you want to take first crack?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. This last even 2 years going to big automation trade shows, like what you'll see is pretty common hat on some pretty excellent displays is a robot looking at a random pile of bags and figuring out which one it can pick up and what it is. And that used to be 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you got to have a human, or you have to buy a big giant simulator that's super expensive and hard to dial in. And now you can put a very inexpensive robot on it and have it do some thinking. And this is suddenly like a very common piece of technology that you can use. Like it is like pretty wild, like level of advancement and speed. And that, you know, a couple years back, that was an uncrackable nut, and now it's not. But John, you probably got some more color on it than that.
Yeah, you know, yeah, I think that was a great context, especially around the, you know, the visibility of this technology. When you go to these conferences, right, every year it's sort of building upon the last, right? It's almost like a snowball in terms of, you know, not just how much of this technology is becoming available, but the functionality of it itself. You know, thinking beyond conversation, I mean, you know, NVIDIA launched, gosh, I want to say it was Jetson several years ago. Obviously, NVIDIA makes the processing cards and the compute power, but they also do software. They created a digital training environment that would allow them to leverage AI and machine learning to train physical robots to perform physical tasks without the mundane process of physically teaching them tasks, right? They created a tool that would allow you to train a robot in silica in a digital environment to perform a physical task. That was first of its kind, right? In order, for example, the example that they had used was using a robot to hit a ball with a hockey stick into a small net, right? And it took hours and hours of doing it over and over and over again before the robot finally learned it. They took that process, put it into a digital simulation, and very quickly taught the robot the process necessary to perform that task, right? So artificial intelligence and machine learning is going into the training of robots, as an example. You mentioned the manipulation aspect of it, Joe, right? Vision systems and allowing robots to learn how to grip something, right? There's multiple companies out there today that are working in the piece-picking domain that, to your point, are leveraging commercial off-the-shelf robotics, layering in various end effectors. The secret sauce isn't coming in all the, you know, let me walk that back a bit. There is secret sauce in the mechatronics, the gripping capabilities, the way they bend and they shape their grippers. But the real secret sauce is how they're training their systems to move and manipulate in order to grab an object based on a learned history of interaction. Meaning you put a tote full of a dozen different things or however many different things in front of a robot, and it needs to pick one. Each time it has to pick that one item, it's learning what that item is, what's its orientation against other things. Is it in a cellophane bag? Is it not? And how to handle that item with the end objective of reducing the error rate being a mispick, right? So that's been going on for several years now as well. And we're seeing more and more instances of the ability to combine that technology with mobile robotic technologies and sort of bring these systems together because of the application of artificial intelligence in the learning and capabilities of these solutions. And then I think, you know, we talked about navigation, and I'd also say workflow optimization, right? A lot of artificial intelligence is about input and output, right? If you've got a batch of work and you've got all this work dispersed throughout a facility, right? Whether it's going to be manually executing robotics, artificial intelligence can take that pool of work and compute the best way to separate those work into different micro batches to allow for more efficient missions, right? It's being applied all over the warehouse these days in ways that, you know, feel natural to us, and we might not even realize that artificial intelligence is a function of the underlying technology that's executing these tools. I know that was a lot there, but obviously it's something that I enjoy talking about clearly.
Oh, and I hope it's helpful for our audience here as well to hear these sorts of expanded answers to this content, because it does, as we've discussed, AI is such a broad terminology, and we're weaving it into robotics more and more every day in different ways that organizations can incorporate this technology into their work. And as a spinoff of that, I'd like to open it, John, with you here, and then pass it over to Joe as well, without peeking too much behind the curtain here. But I'm curious to know if there's sort of AI-related projects that you guys are working on and hoping to roll out in the coming months and over the course of this year, where our viewers can look to Korber and Hy-Tek for these sort of enabled technologies?
Yeah, I mean, look, we mentioned it earlier on. We're looking across the portfolio of solutions that we develop, whether it's WMS, labor management, WCS, and et cetera, and looking at ways to incorporate artificial intelligence into them. We've announced the launch of our unified control system, a tool that's designed to sort of take your WMS, your WCS, your execution layer, and allow you to execute in a robust tech or a heterogeneous technology environment, meaning robot A doing task 1, human doing task 2, robot B doing task 3, and tying them all together. That's all being enabled by machine learning and artificial intelligence tooling. And we have, we're especially excited about the application of AI in slotting and our slotting tools within our WMS that are leveraging artificial intelligence to dynamically slot material based on the ebbs and flows of demand within a data set, and get predictive into how you want to position material within your warehouse. So I think from a supply chain software applications of artificial intelligence, along every step, the big shift will come when we're able to take the data about all of those different touch points, throw them into a big pool, and then allow a system to really say, okay, here's how we optimize your end-to-end material flow as opposed to your point-based flow. I don't think we're there yet, but we're building the blocks to allow us to get there.
Yeah, slotting is a super good point. If anyone's ever had to slot a building with 200,000 SKUs, it's horrible, right? And so, yeah, absolutely. It's a huge data analysis problem. And I think that a bunch of the areas you're going to see it pop in, where like everybody's like really capitalized on seeing vision with AI. And it's like, it's there. It's going to be past where we think it is now. I think a huge use case, and you'll see it a lot, is people developing with it. So we're doing a lot more of that. How do you get through complex data sets? How do you get through messy data and try to get good design requirements out of that? Because like data doesn't come in clean almost ever, right? So I think those are pretty big points. And then on top of that, we are doing, and it's kind of like our bread and butter to look at what's the new technology, what's the next thing. We don't manufacture technology. We try to find the best in breed in the industry. And so what we're seeing is a lot more technologies using a lot more AI and a lot more like very creative mechatronics like slapped on top of that to make some really very, very interesting products. I'm sure a lot of people have seen Agility's like move into humanoid robotics, right? And what does that mean? And there's a lot of AI involved in how you would implement that into a workflow, right? And then like, I think in operations flow, and you touched on this a little bit, John, and this is kind of one of the next like big linchpins. Like everybody's going for a lights out building. How do you get there? I think AI is probably going to be one of the major reasons that we get there soon. Is like, how do you manage the flow of that? Today, there are typically ops managers or flow controllers or somebody in a control tower on these large, very complex systems, understanding how all of that needs to work and then what you need to riff on throughout the shift, right? For lack of a better word. But you could definitely foresee maintenance using like normal CCTV cameras, doing image description, and you could have a jam cam that's telling the operator, hey, go ahead and bring another MDR to this location because it looks like you have a failure based on my assumption, or it's just a normal jam. Like maybe we can just knock it out with a stick, right? That would cut down on maintenance time pretty drastically. You could have drones being able to move through a facility, navigated like pretty precisely, using a whole bunch of AI and image recognition. And even stuff, there's some questions that kind of hint to it, but like understanding how to load and unload a trailer. It's sort of like hints back to the topic about like picking out of a pile of bags, but loading and unloading a trailer is a pretty difficult thing for a machine to do. There's a lot of people trying to do it, and it's I don't want to say holy grail, but it's a very big thing if somebody gets that, right? And I think a big part of that is understanding what the back of a trailer looks like, and then where to go in that trailer and how to manipulate that. It's something that a human can do fairly natively, but I think we're going to start seeing technologies that address that in a very good and a very dynamic way pretty soon. It's going to be pretty excellent. But we're obviously doing a bunch of research on that, so more to come.
And I think that works well to incorporate the last portion of our conversation before we turn to our audience Q&A and put the prediction caps on and look in the magic 8-ball, and I'll open it to Joe, you here first, then we can toss it to John. But we've talked about so much today, the evolution of AI these past handful of years and what it's meant for the robotics industry and even the industry as a whole. But I'm curious if, Joe, you had some thoughts about what the next thing may be. You just mentioned picking out of a warehouse and what we can expect, organizations like Hy-Tek and Kerber to look into with that picking technology. But what's the next thing? What are the next things 2, 5, maybe 10 years down the road that we can look for in terms of AI-enabled robotics and what the marketplace will be yearning for at that point?
I think a big thing that we'll start seeing is you're going to see more creative solutions, and you'll see solutions that will be proposed that are applications that were otherwise not solvable, right? Or you couldn't make the ROI work, or for whatever reason, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's sort of left on the table industry-wide. And I think that using AI and good design techniques and superpowering all your designers and engineers and all your robotics teams, it's going to allow a whole bunch of things that were otherwise out of scope, for lack of a better word, to be solutions that we implement and solve in and can play competitively. And you're going to kind of see a generalized efficiency boost, right? You're going to have more productive folks on the front end designing and selling and creating these things. And you're going to have operations that you couldn't squeeze an extra 5 or 10% out of, but now you can, right? We've found a way to do it better. I think that'll be probably the biggest shift. Well, John, you got some thoughts there?
Yeah, I guess I'll take a different track, right, and think outside the warehouse, because candidly, I think that there's so much exciting stuff happening in this space, right? If we look at artificial intelligence and the impact on healthcare, on the impact on personal health and physical fitness, on education and learning platforms, right? The amount of investment that should be going into how do we leverage this technology across all of these domains really should be significant, right? Imagine being able, and I guess if we look at recent current events and the pace at which we can find a pathogen and get to a treatment or a vaccination for that pathogen, that's vastly shortened because it's not today no longer an effort in trial and error in a laboratory in test tubes. You can take certain characteristics and model them against known options and come out with a more narrow scope of investigation, and therefore shrink the field of decision making to allow you to make these decisions faster. Even go so far as to think about what we're seeing in terms of the growth of self-driving vehicles, right? These are leveraging artificial intelligence to a degree, right? Machine learning, vision systems that are allowing a physical structure to operate without human intervention in a dynamic environment, right? So we're going to continue to see the evolution of this technology, but all that to say, we are so early in this game. I know AI has been a topic for, decades, right? People have been talking about it and figuring it out, but now we're seeing the talk about it and the reality of the situation start to close the gap between the art of the possible and the reality of today. If we look out 5 years from today, it's hard to say that there isn't a warehousing application that doesn't have some degree of artificial intelligence embedded in it. If you're using software in warehousing, there's going to be some function of artificial intelligence layered into the decision-making and the execution of that application. But I think more interestingly is, where's it really going to touch our personal lives, right? We're seeing it. H&R Block has commercials today. Load up your tax documents and we'll use an artificial assistant to do your taxes for you, right? It's just becoming more and more real in our daily lives. And like I said, I think we're very early in the game here, and that there's really some, monumentous change down the pipe, but we're still working primarily with narrow AI, right? Things that are fit for purpose, not general AI that can be applied to take two non-related data sets and really tie them together just yet. That's where we start to see the more influential, more disruptive approach to this tool. Today, it's really going to continue to be focused on point-based applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for handling the Q&A portion from Robotics 24/7 here. And now I'd like to turn our attention to the audience Q&A, and a lot of questions here that are coming up in the chat that deal around budget. And John, I'll throw it to you first, and Joe, if you'd like to add on, please do. But from a budgetary standpoint, what are organizations, and there are a couple here specifically mentioning startups, that need to be mindful of for setting aside part of their budget to incorporate AI? Curious what your thoughts are in that regard.
Well, I think we talked about this earlier, Tim, right? As far as budget, it's where are you applying this stuff? How big are you intending to go? I think more impactfully is the thought process around what's the problem you're trying to solve and what's the technology stack that helps you to get there. And then narrow that down into, are you looking for that, top of the line Cadillac version of whatever application, or is your business more in line with something that's going to get the job done with less bells and whistles, right? Because at the end of the day, the application of artificial intelligence isn't about bells and whistles, it's about outcomes, right? And for a business, it's, how do you balance the expense associated with an outcome with the benefit that that outcome is going to deliver for you? But to that point, it's, with the broad application of these tools in our business applications today, it's already there. You're just budgeting for it in a different way, right? You're budgeting for it in a warehouse management, warehouse control, labor management, slotting side of your practice. And, likely the folks that you're considering are layering in artificial intelligence there. And so the budgeting discussion also has a potential to change from a capital expenditure to an operating expenditure as you think about software as a service, platform as a service, robotics as a service, et cetera.
Yeah, no, I think it depends, right? And you could start, right, just $20, $30 a month with a co-pilot or somebody that's going to let you have access to GPT-4, right? And that could be enough integration for you to determine, like, hey, I can get a ton of benefit out of just using it like this. There's a whole bunch of bolt-ons or plugins for it. A lot of times you'll hear this company's AI startup and it's really just GPT 3.5 or something like that. But that may be, depending on your application, all you really need to get a whole bunch more productivity out of it, right? Yeah, and then I think John's point is right on. If you're working through people like vendors who are looking to the future and trying to innovate all the time, there's an extremely high likelihood that there's AI in their pricing and in their budgets. It may actually pull their pricing down a little bit if it's used correctly, right? But yeah.
And Joe, I'm going to toss this one to you. A couple different variations of this question from the chat, but how are you seeing that humans working in the operations side of the coin here can prepare themselves to stay ahead of robots potentially taking their jobs? We talked a little bit about quelling the fears of staff when they don't want to lose their job to a robot. So what are some of the ways that you guys at Hy-Tek are able to go through and kind of make sure that people are prepared, that they're staying ahead of what capabilities a robot can have, and making sure that these jobs stay in existence?
Yeah, I think this is a complex one, and this is even beyond AI. This is a conversation that typically, if you are in the automation industry, that you have all the time. And I got a couple of notes on it. I love this sales pitch, but oftentimes, if you automate well, it doesn't necessarily remove jobs. It can grow the company, right? And so now you have more revenue, you're competing more effectively, and everything's bigger, right? They used to make shoes by hand, and nobody made shoes because it was hard and expensive, and now we make shoes automatically, and there's a lot of people in the industry. So that's kind of one kind of frame of reference that I like to use on it. As far as taking jobs, again, I don't really believe that happens. Economies grow year over year. It's kind of a thing that we see observationally, but the jobs are different jobs, right? Maybe 40 years ago, I'm a pretty big guy. I'd be pretty good at throwing boxes, and there's better ways to throw boxes than have a person throw boxes, and that's what we see in the industry today. And I think in the future, it's going to be more of that. how do you change the type of work that you're doing so that every human hour is the most productive human hour that we can get, right? I don't think we're going to see people go away, but they're going to be doing different things. So some of those things are going to be interacting with these AIs, right? So if we can make it much simpler to train a robot with AI, we're going to have more people training robots, right? That's a huge expense today. Like right, there's the cost of the hardware, but then really the value of that robot and all the expense associated with it is making it do the things that it needs to do, right? So if we can lower the bar there, you're going to have more people working in that type of work. For people that are going to have jobs that are largely the same, you're going to need to be more productive, and adding AI into your workflow every day, I think is going to be a big one. So, learning how to use those tools, learning how to communicate with it, learning how to build context and narrative, and then try to get, engineer the best prompt you can, for lack of a better word, from those AIs to get what you want. I think it's learning how to do maybe those couple of skills are going to be an excellent start into doing that.
And John, I'm going to ask this one for you. It's a question in regards to operators with multiple software products. We have WCS, WES, WMS. So we've got a couple different examples, but with these possibly disconnected software products, what are some possible side effects, good or bad, when organizations are using AI and needing to be mindful of this possible disconnection with the software that's already in their systems?
Great question. I think first we sort of tackled the first way I would address that question is when you look at those applications, there's functions of those applications where there may be an AI application because they're within a fence, and then there's no need to have it interact with the other stuff because slotting might have no relation to transportation management on the backside. So having those disconnected systems allows you to optimize a function without impacting the broader operation. That said, I've always been a proponent of this idea of drawing the connected tissue across the end-to-end work stream, right? Something comes into your facility, or let's back it out and even go, something's coming to you from a supplier's facility, whether you're a manufacturer or distributor, doesn't matter. How do you draw the data alignment between the process and that product en route to your building, when it gets into your building, then it goes, gets broken down from a pallet to a case to an each, stored on a shelf, picked, packed, shipped, and going out to the next customer, right? Those are all different. That's what happens in a warehouse, right? That's the function of warehouse management. But there's activities that occur with each of these solutions that enable the movement of that material, right? The labor management is telling your people where to be and where to go. The slotting is intelligently putting inventory in places so that your fast movers are closer to the outbound lanes and the slow movers are farther away because you want to be able to pick them faster, things of that nature. So, the disconnection today is a benefit. It allows you to look at how do you improve each of these different operations in silos. The deficiency is you've got operations in silos, and therefore, we know that if you optimize one thing, you typically sub-optimize something else. And how do you start to find that balance, right? So the way in which the future of warehousing will look, and this is the predictive hat on here, is tools such as the UCS that we're creating being deployed to help an organization create that common execution layer while having the ability to interface with each of those siloed applications. Right? Meaning you've got a WMS that ultimately is the brains of a warehousing operation, right? WMS sits up here and directly communicates with the ERP. That's the master data, the inventory master, location data, all that stuff. And it feeds the orders out to the execution layer. But that execution layer might look different. If it's going to a goods to person system, might look different than if it's going to a manual operation, might look different than if it's going to a voice enabled operation, right? And then all of the different layers in there. So, I don't think it's far off that we have a broad set application layer that standardizes the communication back to the ERP or the WMS at the brains level, but has a more dynamic central nervous system, if you will, where all of the workflow is being managed based on where it's going, but then being smoothed at the upper level.
I think we've got time for one more question here, and this one has come up from a couple different folks. Again, thank you so much for submitting these questions for Joe and John here as part of today's conversation. And I'll go with Joe on this one first here, and then John, you can wrap it up. But we've talked a lot about the robotic side of things here. Let's turn our attention now to the humans and the staff. And a lot of the questions that have come up are in regards to skills that these people need to have to, whether they're already in the organization and they want to, stay ahead of these robots, but keep their job and possibly move into that, knowledge element of things and training them, or if you're just trying to get into the field, into the robotics, AI, supply chain side of things here. What sorts of skill backgrounds are you guys hoping to see these employees have that benefit themselves and help the organization grow?
Yeah, let me see. Pop back to one of my slides, but so this sort of does address this level of professional learning, right? Like you have to know different things today than I had to know 20 years ago when I started working. And so one question is what do you need to know? Well, man, that's a broad topic. It kind of depends on the position, but to research that is actually becoming more and more straightforward every day. So one of the things is finding out what relevant material for your job is out there, and then figuring out what is that training plan for you need to look like. So I love the question because it's exactly why I threw this slide on here. But yeah, there's a lot to know, right? From prompt engineering, how do you get the best out of this, or how do I understand who's enabled in the industry and who's a relevant contact point to reach out to. And then taking that and building out a training plan. How do you train yourself, right? When you're going to school, somebody gives you a class schedule and it's pretty straightforward, honestly. You just go there and people tell you how it works. And you can emulate something very, very similar to that. Even just using a free GPT 3.5 bot that's readily available on the internet. So AI can teach you how to use AI in a crazy turn of events here. I think what's even a little bit more interesting than that, and so John talked about automating something that's super painful with AI, so that's slotting. But there's also training and documentation, right? How do you take, so you have all your kind of professional staff, engineers, accountants, all these folks that can use AI and be much more productive. What about the folks that are still in the buildings? A lot of times you'll find that less than perfect integrators out there aren't documenting or helping train, or maybe the customer doesn't want to build the right kind of training program because it's a lot of work, right? You have to have somebody that has a strong command of how to write documents that are technical to the right depth. And I think you can actually utilize AI to build training plans that can be dialed into the specific operator in certain circumstances, and you can check for knowledge and all kinds of stuff. So I think there's sort of two solutions there, right there, right?
Yeah, and I guess just to add to that, one is, to piggyback on what you had said a little while ago, Joe, if you talk about the job risk as the proliferation of technologies, look back, I'd encourage everybody here to look back over the history of the automotive industry when robots were first introduced in the 70s, right? There has been a positive correlation between jobs in the automotive industry and the introduction of robotics and proliferation of robotics in that industry. The more they've automated, the more jobs they've created. To your point, Joe, very different jobs who are doing different things. But the fact of the matter is the technology had created new opportunities to better leverage the skill sets of human beings, right? So I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts, SQL, Python, code, all that stuff. That's less important to me. Important to me are the soft characteristics that technology doesn't have, right? For individuals looking to excel in the workplace, right? Things like curiosity, the willingness to go out there and learn something new, right? The ability to show collaboration, that you're not the only person in the room, that you're able to work with a team to solve complex problems using your curiosity. Courageousness, right? The ability to take risks, calculated risks in the workforce that robots and technology don't do. They do what they're told to do. We need to remember that this technology is programmed intelligence and programmed automation that works within the fences that we as human beings set for it. And then commitment is a big one on our list as well. The willingness to go after something with all that you've got as an individual, because again, technology is going to do what you tell it, with no empathy, no emotion, no feelings around whether or not it's a good job or a bad job to do, right? So, yes, there are technical skills that are valuable, and yes, we do look depending on the role, but they're often role based. But as an employer, we look to find people that fit a culture that can then slot in. Yes, a technical background is helpful, but more so if you're looking at a human being, and human characteristics are vastly different than the capabilities and skill set that technology holds.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much, Joe and John. Greatly appreciate part of the conversation and answering as many questions as we could. Apologies if your question wasn't answered in today's conversation, but we are going to wrap up here. So again, thank you guys so much for joining us on the call.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Interesting.
Thanks for having us. Looking forward to a great year.
Thank you. And again, for our audience,